I don't think it's a question anymore of whether open source is going to get into the enterprise, but more how much and where. Where are you seeing real open source adoption in the enterprise right now?
Well, you're right. It's already there, actually. Historically, the path has been that you would have skunkwork projects. People would start doing something small, then they'd work their way up. But really, that was about 10, 15 years ago. These days, when you have companies like IBM and Oracle pushing Linux and other open source programs as hard as they can to their customers, it's already there. I would suspect at this point most mainframes, for example, the most traditional IT of all IT, most of those mainframes are running Linux instances these days. And it's the same thing with database management systems. Sure, maybe your biggest databases are still running on straight Oracle, but there's a lot of enterprises, not just Fortune 500, Fortune 50 companies now running MySQL, Postgres, and other open source databases as part of their mainstream enterprise infrastructure. And then you look at a company like Google. You want to talk about transactions for a second. Google is responding to the entire universe as fast as they can, and billions of people every day. Billions? Yes, I guess billions of people every day are using them. And what does Google use to make this happen? Linux is the operating system for every server you've got. You could argue that actually the entire world these days are already Linux users, because if you use Google, hey, you're using Linux. But it's not just Linux that Google is using. They're also using Apache for web serving, literally hundreds of other programs to power everything else that they do. And when you look at companies on that level using Linux and open source on a daily basis, open source has arrived. It really is that simple. You may not be aware of it. It may be embedded in an appliance. It may be in a back room on the server racks, so that you're not consciously aware that it's there. But trust me, I would say there's probably not a Fortune 500 company in the world, including even Microsoft, that's not using open source and or Linux today.
How about what some people would see as the tyranny of the Outlook Exchange, Word, Excel axis of evil, as it were?
Well, the desktop, of course, is still primarily Windows. No question about that. At this point, it doesn't look like that's terribly likely to change. But at the same time, though, I'm seeing anyway, another dynamic shift, which is that we're beginning to pull away from the desktop as being the be-all and end-all of end-user computing. So, for example, there you are at your desktop, but you might very well be doing your documents in, say, Google Docs, because it's transparently simple to trade information with your compadre over in San Francisco while you're in New York. You don't have to bother to email it to them. You don't have to put it into an Exchange server somewhere. It's already there in the Google Cloud. They can get to it and so on. And that sort of thing is becoming very common these days. Now, they may be doing this on Windows machines, but the infrastructure underneath that, again, is a Linux infrastructure running open source on top of it. And it's also besides just that you now have more and more services moving to the web, or software as a service, as we like to say. You also have the beginnings now of the cloud, which is basically taking data centers themselves and virtualizing them. And that's a largely open source driven phenomena. And last but not least, I see the desktop itself as we're now moving away from that. We're now not just using smartphones like we used to, everyone knows BlackBerry addicts, Crackberry addicts, as we like to call them. That was a few years ago. Now you've got people doing more and more stuff on their smartphones. Some of them are iPhones. Some of them are Symbian, which is now open source. A lot of them are now Android powered. Again, as a user, you don't know what's going on there. But at this point, really, I'd say iPhone has about 30% of the market, so that leaves 70% that, let's call it 65%, leave 5% over for Windows Mobile and a few other odds and ends. But the vast majority of people are already using open source and or Linux on their mobile phones, which are now transforming into smartphones, which are now we also are having tablets. And again, though the iPad is the example that everyone knows, you've got Cisco introducing a tablet which you can use for business, which is Android-based. You've got all these other companies introducing, or will be introducing in the next couple of quarters, these Android-based tablets, and then Chrome. And I can throw more words at you, but the bottom line is more and more people are using devices that are not desktops to get their work done. They're using tablets, they're using phones, and I see that trend as accelerating very quickly. We're never going to get away from desktops, of course, any more than we ever got away from mainframes. We forgot about them, but they're still there, they're still working, and it will be the same. I see the same thing happening with desktops. We're all still going to be using desktops, but within the next 5 to 10 years, they're going to be, the useful work that'll be done on them will become a smaller and smaller percentage of what people are actually working on a daily basis.
I'd like to finish up by asking a little bit about the cloud.
Sure.
I get notifications every day about, especially universities moving to Google Apps as their, mainly for mail, their primary mail thing.
Sure.
But I would imagine in a lot of companies, especially companies that have compliance issues, moving into a cloud-based, especially email system,
Right.
would have problems. Do you think that we're going to be able to get over that, or do you think that kind of the corporate mail server is going to stay around for a while?
I think it's going to stay around for a while, but I see corporate mail servers moving to the cloud because remember, besides just the public clouds, like what Google effectively is doing, what Amazon would like you to do, you can also do private clouds, which is basically you set up your data servers wherever they are, you turn them into a cloud, which again, you're virtualizing your data centers. It no longer really matters so much whether it's in Provo, Utah, or whether it's in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where your actual machines are. Wherever your machines are, they're all just there for you. If some of them die in the Richmond, Virginia office, maybe the ones in Richmond, California are still alive and working well. As a user, you don't need to care about that. As a system administrator, you do need to care and track that stuff. But again, if you're using a private cloud, it's still all underneath your control wherever it goes. Now, if you're looking at cutting costs, then you probably want to do a public cloud sort of option. And this is still, we're in the nascent stage. Things are still coming together there. I think that the privacy issues are obviously a big concern for a lot of companies with a lot of reason. On the other hand, though, the price cuts, it's simply a cheaper way of doing things. The vendors who are in this space are aware of the privacy issues. They're working really hard on getting this stuff to be as secure as it can be. And I think we're going to get to a point by, say, 2014 or so, where it will still be an issue that you need to look at closely, but it'll be an issue where if you're a CIO or CTO, you're going to get the kind of answers you want to hear and say, this is actually a viable option for us. We actually could put this on the public cloud with Amazon or whatever company. It'll work for us, and we'll save money doing it. Sounds like a win to me.
Just to follow up on that quickly, what did you think of Rackspace's announcement this morning?
The OpenStack?
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting announcement. I think that open source certainly has a significant role to play here on the cloud space. Now, what that role is, I don't have a strong opinion yet because I'm still getting my mind around it. Certainly, by being open, that means that if you have competent programmers in your company, you yourself can look at what they're doing and make a decision not just based on some guarantee from some sales guy or even from one of their executives. You can look at the code, and you can have your programmers look at the code, and they can tell you, does this look solid to you? Does this look secure to you? And I would imagine for a lot of technically adept companies, having that ability to actually go in there and see what's really going on at any time, because this, again, it's a purely open stack, that will be a very attractive notion.
And also, presumably, if you want to do your own small cloud, you'll now have a stronger base to build it on.
Exactly so. Again, Actually, to pull an example from Google again, one of the reasons why Google does open source is if something goes wrong, they don't have to wait for someone else to fix it. They can fix it themselves. So say you have a private cloud, turns out you have a particular concern, a problem maybe of performance, it doesn't run that fast on your machines. You come up with a fix for it. You can just do the fix. You can do it yourself. You don't have to go to the company and say, could you please fix this for us? And they'll tell you, well, yes, we can, but you have to wait for the next release, which is a year and a half from now. And in the meantime, there you are stuck with performance that is not what you wanted.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk.
Thank you. Very much my pleasure.